Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere almost no one remembers, but somewhere that's still very much there, hiding just beneath the waves. You're standing at the edge of the Suffolk coast in eastern England, looking out at a calm sea. The moon hangs low, casting silvery light on the rippling water, and if you listen closely, really listen, you might just hear something off. Not a wave, not a gull, something older. Beneath the surface lies the ghost of a city, Dunwich, a place that was once grander than you'd expect, bustling with trade, bursting with churches, full of voices, footsteps, and the clamor of medieval life. Now it's England's Atlantis, a city lost to storms and silence. You're here at the edge of what used to be its center. Strange, right? Standing in the quiet, where a marketplace once rang with noise. You won't survive the story, not comfortably anyway. Too many ghosts, too much salt in the air. But it's okay. You're only visiting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind is sharp, even in late summer. You tug your coat tighter as you shuffle across the dunes. They're quiet now, just a scattering of sea thrift and wind-torn grasses. But you can feel it, something humming underneath. That's the strange part, isn't it? You're walking on sand, but not long ago this was cobblestone, market stalls, houses with smoking chimneys. People lived here. They prayed, they bled, they laughed in taverns. And they're all still here in some way, buried, disassembled, scattered through centuries and sediment. The first whispers come not from ghosts, but from maps. Dunwich appears on medieval charts like a swollen knot of roads and rivers, a vital port town connecting England to trade routes across the North Sea. It's hard to reconcile that with what you see now, just cliffs and gray water. But imagine you're standing here in the 1200s. This coast is alive. Boats bob in the harbor. Traders from Flanders and France offload barrels of herring and bolts of cloth. Horses clatter over wooden bridges. A friar passes by, muttering a sermon draft to himself, distracted enough to trip over a loose paving stone. Now step back to the present. All of it's gone. Not abandoned, gone. And you're here to listen to what little remains. You glance out toward the sea again. It's not threatening. It's gentle tonight. But in the soft roar of the waves, you begin to make out a different rhythm. A pause. Pattern. Almost like words. You shake it off. Salt in your ears, maybe. The coast here has always been unstable. The cliffs are soft. The tide's aggressive. Combine that with a few well-placed storms and you've got nature's version of medieval urban planning. Remove everything. One by one, Dunwich's buildings were stolen away. Entire streets slipped down into the surf like dropped coins. And people noticed, but not right away. The earliest loss was small. A corner of town, then a house, a road. The monks in their abbey began keeping records. It wasn't just erosion, it was vanishing. Stone didn't just break, it disappeared. It was as if the sea was hungry, or maybe angry, or maybe it had just had enough of humanity's noise. No one thought it would take the whole city. That's always the way, isn't it? You pass a low wall, just a few stones now, but it once surrounded a hospital. You try to imagine it full of coughing patients and shouting nurses. The smell of herbs and rot. Somewhere in the back, a tiny chapel with flickering candlelight. You pause there for a moment, hands on the cold stone. A puff of wind rises off the water, cold enough to sting. From here, you can see the outline of what's left of All Saints Church. Most of it fell into the sea in the early 1900s. People tried to stop it, of course. They even moved the bones from the graveyard inland when the cliffs grew too thin. But the tower held out longest. For years, it stood alone at the edge, like a sentinel, watching the rest of the city disappear. Eventually, it went too. Still, locals say its bell tolls on stormy nights. You look out again. Nothing but sea. But it isn't empty. You start walking again, shoes crunching the gravelly path, and you spot a plaque set into a boulder. It reads, "Site of Dunwich Marketplace, 1290. You blink. There's nothing here now. No stalls. No noise. No smells of fish or baking bread. Just the wind. But close your eyes just briefly, and you can almost hear the market again. A man selling salted eels. A child chasing a dog. A coin clinks into a tin. That sound doesn't go away when you open your eyes. You're not sure you like that. Of course, some say Dunwich deserved its fate. It was a city of pride and sin, they claimed. Too many churches, too much gold, too much noise. Maybe the sea was judgment. Maybe it was mercy. Maybe it was just erosion with good timing. Historians still argue about why exactly the city wasn't saved. Was it political distraction? Economic decline? Or did they just give up? No one really knows. There are records, yes, but they're dry, vague. They don't tell you how it felt to lose a whole world one wall at a time. To wake up and realize your house was now a memory. Your road was a wave. Your graveyard was drifting toward France. You reach the end of the path, and there, below, the sea continues to whisper. You sit down, you listen, and the city speaks back. Not in words, but in weight, in silence, in the faint outline of something that was once alive and is now only half dead, half dreaming, waiting for you to remember. And so you do. You remember Dunwich, even if the sea does not. You haven't moved in a while. The sea has that effect. It's hypnotic, steady but deceptive, like a soft-spoken liar. The waves glide in and out as if nothing has ever changed, as if they've always looked this way. But you know better now. Somewhere beneath those folds of water lies a map of streets, homes, and hearts. And tonight, for a few fleeting moments, you're walking them again. You rise slowly and wander inland, though inland here just means not underwater yet. There's a stretch of low grass ahead, soft and squishy underfoot, interrupted by small ridges and dips. These aren't just hills. These are ruins, buried foundations of what was once central Dunwich. A bakery here, a tavern there. You imagine the sign swinging above a doorway, the salted hog, or something equally medieval, smells of ale, old wood, and the warmth of too many bodies crammed into too little space. And suddenly, you're not alone. You see it, don't you? Just in your mind. A flicker. A man hauling a crate of dried fish down a lane that no longer exists. Children chasing a hoop. The flutter of a nun's robe as she hurries across the square. It's all phantoms, but it's real enough for now. The stone streets that once wove Dunwich together are submerged, somewhere out there. Divers have found them, walls, wells, even steps carved from flint. No golden coins, no jeweled relics, but the ordinary stuff, the best kind. A clay pot here, a shoe buckle there. These are the souvenirs of a life you didn't live, but now, strangely, you kind of miss. You walk a little farther and your foot hits something hard beneath the moss. You crouch and brush it with your fingers. A corner of a stone block, blackened with time, the edge still sharp. Someone once stepped here, every day maybe, in muddy shoes. They probably cursed when it rained and this turned slick. They probably never thought it would one day be the only thing left of their home. It's funny, isn't it? How solid things vanish while the most fragile ones. Stories, echoes, ghost feelings persist. You hear a gull overhead and instinctively glance up, then smile faintly. That bird has no idea it's flying over a drowned city. No reverence. No poetry. Just looking for chips, probably. You reach the edge of what's left of an old chapel. Not All Saints, this was another one. St. Nicholas, maybe. No one's quite sure. There were 18, remember? 18 churches in a town that now has none. That's not a metaphor, that's just history's version of irony. You step into what would have been the nave. The walls are gone, but the shape is still there, like a shadow in the grass. Your feet know where to go almost by instinct. You stop where the altar once stood. It's just grass now. No crucifix, no candlelight. Just a few birds nesting nearby and a sun that's slowly inching downward into the haze. You close your eyes again. You're doing that a lot tonight. But it's okay. Some stories aren't seen, they're felt. Picture it. Sunday morning, 12:61. The town bells are ringing. You're late to Mass. The sky smells like salt and wet wool. And the chapel is packed. People whisper. A baby cries. Someone coughs the way people always cough in closed rooms full of candle smoke and superstition. And the priest, he's up there trying to remind everyone to be humble, to be thankful. Even as another corner of the town crumbles into the drink. They must have felt it, that creeping fear, like walking on a frozen lake, knowing the cracks are already there, somewhere just beneath your feet. A church is never just a building. It holds hopes, confessions, lies, grief. If enough people cry inside one place, it becomes sacred, whether you believe in the sky guy or not. Now it's just earth and memory. You sit on the altar, sacrilegious maybe, but no one's keeping score anymore, and you feel how soft the stone has become. The sea didn't take this one. Not yet, but it's coming. The ground beneath you is unstable. You know that. You've read the reports. More will fall. Maybe in your lifetime. Maybe in the next rainstorm. Still, here you are. There's a particular kind of silence that only comes with ruins. It's not the absence of noise. It's the presence of something else. Of time. Of waiting. Of not being whole. The weirdest part? No one really talks about Dunwich. Sure, local historians and folklore nerds like us get excited. But the general public? They have no idea. Ask someone on the street, and they'll say, Dunwich? Isn't that the Lovecraft thing? You sigh. No, sweetheart. Lovecraft borrowed the name. The real Dunwich sank all by itself. No ancient gods required. But still, you can't help feeling like there's something just offshore watching, listening. People say that, on calm nights you can hear, not the sea, not quite, something layered beneath it. Voices, singing, bells. One diver even claimed he heard chanting underwater. Soft, muffled, as though someone was holding mass in another dimension. He quit diving after that. Bought a pub inland. You don't blame him. You glance down at your hands and realize you've been rubbing moss off a stone for 10 minutes, like you're trying to polish the past back into being. It won't work, of course, but it's a nice thought. Somewhere below you, the rest of the city waits. Walls, doors, fireplaces, maybe even a comb still stuck between floorboards. It's all down there, in the dark. Preserved not in amber or glass, but in salt and sand and forgetfulness. But you're remembering it now. That counts for something. You stand up, brush the dirt from your coat, and take one last look around the invisible chapel. Then you walk on, eastward, toward where the street would have sloped gently down, toward the market, toward the sea. Your feet crunch over what was once commerce, once community, once a city, and the waves begin to whisper again. You follow the invisible slope down, tracing a road that doesn't exist anymore. Not really, but somehow your steps still find it. Maybe it's muscle memory borrowed from someone long dead. Maybe it's the way the wind shifts, nudging you where it wants you to go. Or maybe, and this is just a thought, you're not the first visitor tonight. There's something about the way the grass lies flat here in two narrow bands like the ruts left by wagon wheels. You imagine the creak of wooden axles and the shout of a merchant guiding his horse through the early morning mist. The air still smells faintly of brine, but there's something else too, something warm and ancient and gone. You're walking down what was once Dunwich High Street. That's not guesswork. Archaeologists confirmed it years ago. Sonar scans, careful triangulations, the whole deal. They even mapped out some of the structures that line either side. A tannery here, a blacksmith's there, maybe a fishmonger at the end of the lane. You picture it all. The hammering, the shouting, the stink of boiling leather and smoke. There was life here, a whole world. Now there's only quiet. But the road remembers. Some people say that Dunwich was swallowed by the sea in a single night, like a fairy tale. That's not quite true. It was slower, more patient, like the tide itself, creeping, licking, nibbling. A few feet gone here, a corner lost there, and then a century later, half the town is just gone. You pause as the wind kicks up, carrying a sharp scent of salt and decayed seaweed. Behind that, you catch the faintest whiff of something burning. Not fire, something gentler, like candle wax or incense. And that's when you see it. Just ahead, a fragment of wall juts out from the grass like a broken tooth. You kneel beside it, brushing away soil. It's no more than a few inches tall now, but the flintwork is unmistakable, carefully arranged by hands that were long since dust before the Renaissance was a glint in history's eye. You trace the grooves with your fingers and feel the texture change. There's a mark, carving, not a letter, not quite, maybe a symbol. It looks like a fish or a cross or both. You lean in closer, but a sudden gust of wind stings your eyes and makes you blink. When you open them, the wall feels colder. You stand up quickly, brushing your hands on your coat, and turn toward where the market square would have been. The center of Dunwich, once a place of chaos, gossip, and the kind of barter deals that would make modern economists cry. Barrels of herring, sacks of wool, wheels of cheese, and endless arguing. You picture the town crier announcing some new decree. Taxes raised, a ship missing, a saint's feast moved because the bishop caught a cold. You can almost hear the clamor. You stop in the middle of it all and listen. Nothing, not even the gulls this time. There's a kind of stillness here that feels curated, as if something or someone wants you to pay attention. This was the heartbeat of the city. Not the churches, not the manor houses. Here, the market, where people mingled, argued, flirted, lied. You imagine a baker yelling at a thief, a knight's horse leaving an undignified mess near the butter stand, a child losing their mother in the crowd and wailing until someone handed them an apple. Now it's just grass and air. You sit on a low stone that might have once been a corner post. It's warm from the afternoon sun. You close your eyes again because that's become your ritual now. Eyes open, the ruin. Eyes shut, the memory. And tonight, the memory's stronger. You see a woman wrapping cloth around loaves of bread. She's tired, her hands cracked from heat and flour, but she smiles as she hands a roll to a boy with freckles. The boy runs off barefoot through puddles. You see a man trying to fix a broken cart wheel while three friends offer help in the form of sarcastic comments. You hear a dog bark. Someone shouts something about fish that smells like death. And above it all, the bells. Not underwater yet. Ringing from all directions. Their clangs not coordinated, not refined, just loud and human. Now open your eyes. Silence. The square is empty, but you can't quite shake the feeling that you're being watched. Not in a scary way, just noticed, like the land itself knows you're here and appreciates it. You rise and walk across the field. veering toward where a line of stones suggests a row of buildings. You kneel at one. Maybe it was a shop, maybe a house, maybe both. People lived where they worked back then. You press your palm against the stone and wait. There's a sudden shiver. Not from you, from the stone. But when you look again, it's perfectly still. You remember something you read once. Some villagers say they still hear footsteps at night. Not theirs. Not on land. From the shore. From under the shore. As if the city still walks. You don't know if you believe that, but you do believe this. Places remember. Stone remembers hands. Ground remembers footsteps. Air remembers breath. And sometimes, just sometimes, memory rises to the surface. Tonight is one of those nights. You walk slowly back toward the ridge. The sun is beginning to drop into the horizon, bleeding gold into the water. You watch the reflection ripple, thinking about how light moves faster than sound, but slower than grief. And Dunwich is full of grief. Not loud, not weeping, just quiet, enduring grief. The kind that accepts being forgotten, but still whispers to those willing to listen. You are listening, and that's all it ever wanted. The wind shifts again, not violently, just enough to carry a new scent. Damp stone, earth disturbed, something old and disturbed beneath the surface. You know the feeling, the way a library smells when you find a book that hasn't been touched in decades. It's not rot, it's memory, and Dunwich is thick with it. You follow the ridge toward the cliff's edge, your steps slow, thoughtful. The ground grows uneven, patches of grass giving way to crumbling soil. Below, the waves crash against the shale with just enough rhythm to make your bones uneasy. You stop when the land begins to tip beneath your feet. Not visibly, but your body knows when something isn't steady. This is where it happened. Not all at once. No, it never works like that. The first major collapse was in the late 1200s, but the sea had been nibbling at the edge long before then. A small part of the town, homes, shops, parts of the quay, slipped quietly into the dark. It made barely a ripple in the records. Just a few lines in a parish ledger. Losses due to the storm. But then came the night the sea took the cliff. It wasn't just erosion that evening. It was something more brutal, more immediate. A storm slammed into the coast like a battering ram. Not one of those poetic storms with silver lightning and romantic doom. No, this was the angry kind. The kind that doesn't care if you built your home with prayer and taxes and good intentions. The kind that just wants to erase. You picture it. February 1286. Wind shrieking like a cathedral choir out of tune. Rain sideways, sharp as pins. The sea rising up the harbor like it had finally decided to return everything it once gave. People fled their homes, clutching children, sacks of grain, whatever they could carry. And then the cliff gave out. Just gone. Not crumbled. Not fractured. Gone. A whole section of Dunwich, houses, streets, memories, swallowed in a moment. Some say it happened at midnight. Others swear it was just before matins. The monks would have been awake, praying. Maybe they saw it. Maybe they watched neighbors vanish into the surf and knew even then they'd be next. And no one talks about the sound. Those who survived said it wasn't like thunder or rockfall. They said it was like the sky exhaled. A single, low, sucking groan, like the earth realizing it was tired of holding things up. You step closer to the cliff now, peering down. The water isn't angry tonight. It laps gently against the shore, as if apologizing for its outburst 7 centuries ago. But you know it's not sorry. It's just waiting. The edge is unstable. Grass overhangs in wisps, pretending everything's fine. But underneath, the soil is cracked, riddled with tunnels made by time and rain and roots. You wonder how many footsteps it will take before this spot gives out too. Hopefully not yours. Hopefully not tonight. You take a cautious seat on a flat stone near the lip, something that might have once been part of a doorstep, and you breathe in the history. Not the romantic kind, the kind that never makes it into textbooks. You don't smell victory or progress or heroic tales. You smell wet stone, fading chalk, and the faint metallic tang of a nail rusting far below. Behind you, if you turn to look, is where the town continued. Or rather, where it tried to continue. People didn't leave after the first collapse. Of course not. They were medieval. They didn't just pack up and move inland because a few houses fell into the sea. That would be sensible. Instead, they prayed harder, built higher, dug deeper. They believed, as people often do, that disaster happens to other people. You watch the waves and think about one particular account. A merchant who returned to Dunwich after months abroad, only to find the street where he lived no longer existed. Not damaged, missing, like someone had edited the earth and forgotten to tell him. He had to be told gently. The priest took him by the elbow, led him to the new shoreline, and said, "It was here," and the man stood there, blinking at open water, refusing to believe. He never stopped calling it his street, even after it drowned. You wonder how many others clung to pieces of Dunwich long after it ceased to exist. Did they speak of it at feasts? Did they say things like, "I was baptized at All Saints," or "My mother used to sell apples on West Row"? Long after those places were at the bottom of the sea? Of course they did. That's what people do. We name things until they vanish. And even then, we keep the names. You shift on the stone, careful not to send pebbles tumbling over the edge. Below, the tide pulls back slightly, revealing wet rocks slick with seaweed. Somewhere out there, maybe just beneath the foam, lie timbers from old houses. Maybe parts of a church. Maybe bones. People have dived there. You've seen the photos. Grainy, greenish images of half-buried doorways and stone steps leading nowhere. Like dreams left unfinished. The currents are dangerous. Visibility is low. But still they go. One diver said the strangest thing he saw wasn't a structure. It was a candle, still upright, still wedged into a crevice like someone had just finished praying and left it there, expecting to return. He didn't take it. No one does. The sea would never allow it. The sun has almost gone now, just a smear of orange on the water. You stand slowly, feeling your knees pop with age or awe, maybe both, and take one last look down the cliffside. You imagine someone else sitting here 700 years ago, a child maybe, kicking their legs, watching the tide come in, oblivious to what was coming. Or maybe not. Maybe they heard it too, the way the land shifted, the way the sea made promises it never kept. You turn back toward the path. The cliff is still here, for now, but it remembers falling. And tonight it's letting you remember too. You wake up in the middle of a sentence. Or maybe it's just the wind whispering through the tall grasses again, finishing a thought someone started centuries ago. The path ahead curves away from the cliff edge now, leading you inland by only a few yards. But inland here is a matter of perspective. After all, Dunwich once stretched far beyond what your eyes can now see. You're walking on borrowed earth, the kind that rearranges itself when no one's watching. And tonight you are being watched. By memory, by moss, by something underfoot that used to be sacred. Because beneath you, somewhere in the wet sand and chalk and sea-washed bones, rests a chapel. Or rather, what's left of All Saints Church. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. The one about the bell that still rings from under the sea. You'd laugh, maybe, if you were in a brighter place, with drier socks and less mist seeping into your collar. But here, with fog clinging to the trees and a moonless sky above, you're not laughing. Not exactly. All Saints was the most prominent of Dunwich's churches. Not the largest, not the oldest, but the last. The one that refused to go quietly. Even as the cliff beneath it vanished bit by bit, stone by stone, the tower held on. They propped it up, shored it with boards, and prayed, always praying, that it would stand another year, another week, another night. It lasted longer than anyone expected. Like a stubborn relative who refuses to leave the party, long after the food's gone cold. You make your way toward the remains. There's nothing towering left now, just a scatter of stone blocks, an outline of foundation swallowed by grass. But your feet know where to go. They follow the pattern, unthinking, through the nave, past the absent pews, toward the chancel. The ghosts are quiet here, respectful, maybe. We're sleeping, but the wind isn't. Picks up suddenly, and in that rush of air you hear it just faintly. The bell. 3 low chimes, carried not by sound waves but by suggestion. Not loud, not demanding, just present, like someone tapping on the inside of your skull with a finger wrapped in velvet. You stop walking. You're not breathing. You wait, but the bell doesn't ring again. You've read the accounts, haven't you? Locals say the bell tolls during storms, when the sea grows restless. Some say it rings before a death. Others claim it answers questions whispered aloud. One particularly persistent man claimed to have recorded it on tape in 1972, but when he played it back, all he heard was static and then silence. You ask yourself if it matters whether it's true, and you decide that no, it doesn't, because you heard it, and that's enough. You move to where the altar would have been and sit, careful not to disturb the moss. This place, this ruin, still carries weight, not just in stone, but in intention. You feel it in the back of your neck. The space doesn't need walls to be sacred. Sometimes absence is holy. You lean back, palms in the grass, and let your eyes trace the stars. Just for a moment, a breath of quiet, and then you speak. Not loudly, just one word. Hello. There's no answer. Of course there's no answer. But the wind stills for a beat longer than it should have. The leaves hold their breath. And somewhere behind your ribs, your heart tries to convince you that it heard something. All Saints didn't fall all at once. It eroded slowly, its tower clinging to the cliff like a child refusing to leave the dinner table. They say people used to picnic there, even as the graveyard beneath it began to crumble. That's very English of them, really. Tea among the tombs. Sandwiches with a side of existential dread. You imagine it now. A Sunday afternoon. Families sitting on checkered cloths while the edge of the world loomed 20 feet away. Laughter. Lemon biscuits. Children daring each other to peer over the edge and spot a skeleton. And then, years later, another collapse. Another dozen feet lost. Bones scattered. Coffins half visible in the cliff face, like teeth in a broken jaw. Eventually, they moved the graves. What they could recover, anyway. Some weren't recoverable. Some are still down there. You're sitting above them now. You wonder if they mind. You speak again, softer this time. Just a thank you. For letting you visit, for holding on as long as they did. You stand slowly and make your way toward the path again. Behind you, the stones stay silent. The bell does not ring, but in the distance, far out to sea, you think you hear something else. A creak, perhaps, or a sigh. Some historians argue that the bell is a myth, that it was removed and melted down in the 19th century. That stories of it ringing from beneath the sea are nothing but folklore mixed with wishful thinking and damp air. But you know better. You were here. You heard it. And it wasn't just a bell. It was a heartbeat. A city remembering itself just long enough for someone to notice. You continue walking. Your boots crunch the gravel again. The fog thickens behind you. And somewhere beneath the waves, The bell waits to ring again. You're not walking anymore, you're drifting. The path beneath you still crunches like gravel, but there's something soft creeping in at the edges. A sense of weightlessness, like the land is growing thinner, stretched over something deep and old and waiting. You glance to the side and notice the soil's different here, looser, cracked in patches, as though the earth has been holding its breath too long. This is the place, the ledge, where the cemetery used to be. You step carefully, as though you might wake something. Once, this was the resting place for hundreds, maybe thousands, of Dunwich's dead. Tidy rows of headstones, most of them simple. Carved flint, worn Latin inscriptions, a modest cross. The kind of graveyard that existed more for the living than the dead. Somewhere to visit, to weep, to remember. And now, there's nothing, or nearly nothing. The cliff took most of it, piece by piece. One rainstorm at a time, one landslide after another. The bones gave way just like the buildings did. They slipped silently into the water, some still in their coffins, others exposed like white roots unraveling from the shoreline. You've seen the old photos, grainy black and white images of half-unearthed skeletons staring blankly from the eroded cliff face. Not Hollywood horror, just quiet resignation, as if the dead were waiting patiently to join the town below. You find a fragment of stone in the grass. Just a corner. No name, no date. You run your thumb along its edge and feel the soft wear of centuries. Someone once stood here with tears in their eyes and placed a hand on this marker. Maybe they whispered a prayer. Maybe they just stood silently, their grief too full for language. And now you're standing in the same spot. That's how time works in places like this. Layered, collapsing in on itself. One moment pressed flat against another until it's all just the same thin page of history. There's a low rise ahead, barely noticeable. But if you know what you're looking for, and you do, you realize it's the last remaining edge of the cemetery. Beyond that, nothing. Just a sheer drop and the sea gnawing at the bones of the past. You don't approach it just yet. Instead, you sit on the edge of the rise and look out. The horizon is heavy tonight. The clouds hang low, thick as wool, and the air is dense with salt. The kind of atmosphere that clings to your lungs and makes your skin feel just a little older. You wonder how many people were buried here, and how many are still buried somewhere out there. Not in coffins anymore, not in peace, just scattered, mixed into the seabed. 1,000 souls in drift. The church tried to stop it, of course. They always do. In the late 1700s, there were attempts to reinforce the cliff. Wooden beams, stone walls, the occasional desperate prayer. None of it worked. The sea is patient. It doesn't need to rush. Took the cemetery slowly, deliberately, like a hand picking petals from a flower. By the 1800s, half the graves were gone. By 1910, only a few stones remained. By 1922, even those began to fall. And now, here you are, sitting in a place that used to be sacred, trying not to think about how many ankles lie beneath your boots. You finally stand and take a few cautious steps forward. The edge is closer than you expected. It's not marked. There's no warning sign, just a sudden absence. One more step and you'd be with them, bones and all. You kneel and peek over. And there it is, the raw cliff face, bleeding layers of soil and stone and memory. And embedded in it, halfway down, is a sliver of something white. Bone. Long, smooth, silent. It might be a femur. Might be someone's grandmother. Might be yours, if you stay here long enough. You look away quickly, not because you're afraid, but because it feels impolite. You move back a step and sit down again. The grass here is softer than you expected. It grows thick where no one walks, protected by neglect. The dead don't mind grass. There's something deeply strange about this place. Not spooky, Not cursed, just unresolved, like a question no one's been willing to answer for centuries. Why did Dunwich fall? Why was nothing saved? Why did they let the graveyard crumble? Some say it was inevitability. Nature doesn't bargain. Some say it was carelessness, a government that forgot its coast. And some say the people here were just tired, that they knew the sea would win in the end, and they made their peace with that. Historians still argue over the details, disagreements over maps, conflicts in the records. One researcher even insists the graves were never real, that they were invented to add drama to tourism brochures in the 1920s. But you've seen the photos, you've seen the bones, and bones don't lie, not when they're watching you from a cliff. The sun is gone now, fully vanished beneath the sea, and the darkness has settled like a blanket. A chill wraps itself around your shoulders, the kind that doesn't come from temperature, comes from time, from knowing something is underneath you, still unfinished, still remembering. You reach down, press your hand flat against the grass, and whisper a name. Any name. Doesn't have to be real. It's the gesture that matters. A recognition, a thank you, and maybe, just maybe, someone hears it. You stand. The cliff behind you waits, still hungry, but tonight it lets you go. You walk with the kind of quiet you don't notice at first, the hush that settles after a funeral, or the stillness in a museum room when everyone has stepped out. That's what this part of Dunwich feels like. Not ruins, not wilderness, remembrance. The land flattens out briefly here, a stretch of scrub and dry earth that bears no markings, no plaques, no fence lines. But if you look closely, you'll see it, the ghost pattern of something once very specific. This was the Guildhall. Yes, there was one. Because Dunwich wasn't some windswept fishing village waiting to die. It was powerful, significant, once anyway. In the 1200s, this place had more political clout than many inland cities. It sent 2 members to Parliament. It had tax collectors, a mayor, aldermen, and seals to prove it. And the Guildhall? That was their stage. A 2-story timbered building near the center of town, where trade was regulated, disputes settled, and civic pride polished to a shine. Now there's not even a beam left. But that's the thing about pride. It rarely leaves quietly. You find a spot where the eastern wall might have stood and crouch, touching the dirt. There's nothing to feel but soil and dry roots. Still, you try, just in case a splinter of oak remembers the weight of judgment passed here. You imagine it. A summer afternoon in 1274. Sun slanting through leaded windows. A group of merchants arguing about fishing rights. A clerk scratching notes with a feather that's seen too many Mondays. A constable falling asleep on his feet. And outside, life bustling on. They had no idea what was coming. Or maybe they did and just refused to believe it. You walk the perimeter slowly, tracing the rough dimensions of the old hall. 25 feet this way, then another 30 that way. Your steps feel ceremonial, like you're conducting a tour for ghosts. You find a flat stone half buried in the dirt and brush it clean. It might have been a threshold, might have felt boots, hooves, maybe the corner of a cask once dragged through on a wet morning. You sit on it now, because that's what you do, isn't it? Sit where history forgot to leave a chair. The story of Dunwich's guilds is odd. Usually, guilds were a sign of order, of permanence. Bakers, fishmongers, coopers, masons. They created structure, trained apprentices, guarded secrets. They were supposed to make a town resilient. And yet here you are. No fish, no flour, no barrels, no walls. Just the sea, always nearby, humming like a lazy predator. Some guild records survived. Barely. Bits of parchment tucked into regional archives. Forgotten until someone with allergies and elbow patches found them in a filing drawer. One mentions an argument about ale. Naturally. Apparently, two brewers accused each other of watering down barrels destined for the priory. There was shouting. There was a formal complaint. A hearing was held in this very hall. The verdict? Both fined. Both scolded. And one warned not to dampen God's blessing again. You smile. It's such a small thing, but it's real. You're not walking through myth. This was a town of fishy politics and petty beer feuds. And that makes it more alive than any legend. Of course, the guilds tried to fight the erosion too. They funded repairs, lobbied for help from the crown, even hired engineers. But all the structure in the world can't stop a tide that doesn't care. Eventually, their minutes stopped being recorded. No one noticed the silence right away. But silence, like the sea, always wins in the end. You rise and stretch. Your back pops in 3 places. The wind's gotten colder, sharper, whistling across the flat plain like it's remembering the shape of a roof that no longer exists. You tug your coat tighter and step away from the invisible walls. And then you see it. A small, bent nail lying in the dirt. Old iron, rusted through, but unmistakable. You crouch again, brushing around it, half expecting it to dissolve at your touch. But it holds. It's a nail. A literal nail. Someone hammered this into a beam. Maybe with frustration. Maybe with satisfaction. It once held a frame together, a room where things mattered. And now it's just there, waiting. You don't take it. You leave it exactly where it is. Because this town doesn't belong in museums. It belongs to itself. You walk on, deeper into where the city once pulsed, each step softer now. The air smells like turned earth and distant salt, and your ears are filled with the sound of your own breathing. It's almost like Dunwich is walking with you now, not guiding, not warning, just accompanying. And suddenly that feels right. You've become part of its rhythm, not an outsider, not a tourist, but something else, a guest in a place that never truly left. You come upon a path that shouldn't exist, not because it's hidden, quite the opposite, really. It's clear as day, flattened grass, a suggestion of worn stone beneath the surface, and the unmistakable feeling that people have walked this way for a very, very long time. But there's a problem. It's heading straight toward the sea. And according to every map you've seen, the coastline now ends where the road once began. You stand there a moment, confused. The logic of modern geography and the stubbornness of history grinding against each other inside your mind like mismatched gears. The sea is supposed to be a barrier. The past is supposed to be unreachable. And yet this road leads you forward like it still believes in destination. So, of course, you follow. Because why not? The grass parts beneath your feet like it's been waiting for you. The wind dies down. Even the gulls fall silent. It's like walking into a memory so vivid. Even the present forgets to interrupt. You start to see shapes. Not structures exactly, but suggestions. A wall here. The ghost of a doorway there. Light catches on something glassy beneath your feet. Maybe a shard of pottery, maybe just a trick of the eye. You can't tell. You don't stop to check. And then, as you crest a gentle slope, you feel it. The echo does not sound, not exactly, but it rolls through you just the same, like a song you knew once in a dream. There's rhythm. There's intention. A slow, ceremonial pulse. You've arrived at the priory, or what remains of it. You wouldn't know it at first glance. There are no spires, no soaring archways, just stone foundations, half swallowed by soil and silence. But if you stand still enough, if you let your imagination settle in like a tide pool, you begin to see it. The cloisters, the central courtyard, the chapel, its ceiling long since claimed by gravity and weather. Dunwich had not just churches, it had monks. Augustinians, to be precise. They came here in the early 1100s, bringing prayer, education, and more importantly, record-keeping. For a time, the priory was the spiritual and intellectual heart of the town. You step inside the shape of its remains. There's something sobering about walking into a chapel with no roof. The sky replaces the stained glass. The stars replace the saints. And yet it still feels holy, in its own ragged way. You pause in what would have been the transept. The stone beneath your feet is uneven, chipped, but dry, and strangely warm. You imagine a monk kneeling here, hands clasped, whispering a prayer not for salvation, but for stability, because they knew the erosion wasn't a surprise. The priory's documents are full of references to it. One line, written in a hand so delicate it looks like spiderweb, reads, "The sea eats the edge of the world. We mark each bite." How poetic, and how devastating. You walk the perimeter, trailing your fingers along invisible walls. The monks kept bees here, tended gardens, copied manuscripts by candlelight. They weren't perfect, no monastic community ever is, but they were diligent, and they cared about this place. You reach the spot where the scriptorium likely stood, the writing room, now just a patch of wildflowers. You crouch and pick a single bloom. Yellow, fragile, smells faintly of pepper. You hold it in your palm like a relic. Somewhere beneath your knees, a monk might have once copied a sermon, or drawn an illuminated letter D that took 3 days and 4 ink colors. Maybe he spilled wax and cursed, then immediately repented. You sit down in the grass. The wind stirs again, softer now. It tugs at your coat, presses your sleeves against your skin. The sky has turned a darker shade of blue. You look up, expecting stars, but instead see clouds, the kind that hold back rain but remember thunder. This was once a place of refuge, and then it became a place of erosion. The priory held out longer than much of the town. Solid construction, thick walls, higher ground. But even so, by the 1300s, it was already fading. Fewer novices, weaker harvests, letters asking the crown for aid and getting silence in return. One chronicler wrote, "The brothers walk shorter paths now. The world narrows." What a line. You think about that as you lie back in the grass, staring into the endless sky, feeling your own world narrow. Not in a sad way, in a gentle, inevitable way. The priory didn't collapse in drama. It dwindled, like a candle burning down. You exhale and let your body sink into the earth just slightly. It's easy to imagine a time when this was still intact, when someone might have passed by, humming, robe swishing, unaware of the centuries watching them from ahead. You close your eyes for a moment, and the priory returns. Walls rise, steps echo, a bell rings. Not underwater this time, but clear, high, and alive. You open your eyes again. It's gone, of course, but your breath has slowed, your thoughts too. And for a moment, just a single trembling moment, you feel as though you've been prayed for. Centuries too late, but sincerely. You rise slowly, flower still in hand, and begin to walk again. The priory watches you go. It doesn't ask anything. It only remembers, and that's enough. The path bends gently now, curving away from the priory ruins and into a corridor of low trees. Twisted, hunched things, like old men with secrets. Their branches reach across the trail, not quite touching, but close enough to give you pause. Feels different here. Darker, yes, but not just because of the trees. The air itself changes. Thicker, tighter, the kind of atmosphere that makes your chest tighten a little, not from fear, but from attention. Something wants to be remembered, and you're very close now. You're entering the place where the town's heart once beat the loudest. The harbor, or more accurately, where the harbor used to be. Now it's just reeds, mud, the occasional glint of stone sticking out of the silt like the fossil of a world that forgot how to float. But if you squint, if you let your mind drift just slightly, you'll see it. The ships, dozens of them, masts swaying, canvas creaking, sailors shouting in 5 languages, because Dunwich wasn't just coastal, it was connected. Trade routes from the Low Countries, the Baltic, France, were going out. Wine, salt, and spices coming in. Some of the boats carried goods. Some carried messages. And some carried the plague. But we'll come back to that later. Right now, you stand at the edge of the old quay. There's nothing left of it, not really. But your feet still find the imprint of stone laid long ago. You toe the edge of a flat surface buried just below the grass and know, without question, that someone once moored a ship here. You crouch again. How many times have you done that tonight? And run your fingers along the edge. It's rough, worn, like the rim of a pew polished by centuries of elbows and prayers. But this wasn't a place of worship. This was where the world arrived. You close your eyes and hear it. Waves slapping wood, chains rattling, a gull shrieking overhead, a boy yelling something about herring. You don't try to stop the images this time. You let them in. You let Dunwich return. The harbor at its height was bustling. Over 20 ships docked regularly. Dozens more passed through seasonally. Warehouses lined the shore, their doors yawning open like toothless mouths stuffed with sacks of wool and bolts of cloth. The air stank of fish, of salt, of sweat. It was beautiful. The kind of chaos that feels productive, necessary. You imagine a woman with sunburned arms shouting orders over the din. A man scribbling cargo weights in a ledger. A stray dog chewing on a boot it definitely didn't earn. All of it alive. All of it purposeful. And now gone. Swallowed, not by violence, but by attrition. The sea moved in slowly. Not like an army. More like a fungus. Every year, the harbor became harder to use. Channels silted. Moorings failed. Storms reshaped the coastline with all the mercy of a drunk sculptor. And eventually, the trade died. The merchants moved on. The sailors stopped coming. And the harbor, like everything else, was forgotten. Except by the sea, of course. The sea remembers everything it steals. You stand again and wander along what would have been the quay's edge. You find a post, maybe from a mooring ring, half submerged in the mud. It wobbles when you touch it, but doesn't fall. Stubborn, like the town itself. You try to imagine what the town looked like from the water, approaching from a distance, spires poking the sky, smoke from hearths, bells echoing, promise of warmth and trade. A home. It must have been something. Now the water is silent, still, as if resting after the feast. You don't stay long. Something about this place feels finished, like a chapter closed, not with drama, but with dust. Still, before you leave, you find a rock. Smooth, almost round. You place it carefully beside the post. An offering, a marker, a thank you. For commerce, for chaos, for remembering how loud the sea once was. And then you turn back into the trees. The harbor doesn't watch you go. It's already dreaming of tides to come. You walk deeper into silence. Not the kind that rings in your ears or makes you question your footsteps, but the kind that feels rehearsed, practiced, as if everything here is waiting to tell you something, but only if you already know what to listen for. You pass a clump of low hedges, wild and brambly, and beyond them lies a shallow depression in the earth, circular, faint, almost too subtle to notice until you feel it underfoot. It's the market square, or what's left of it. You pause at the edge, unsure whether to enter. There's nothing visibly dangerous about it. No fence, no signs. Just this vague dip in the landscape, like a breath drawn in and never let out. And yet, somehow it feels more haunted than the ruins, more saturated than the graveyard, and more fragile than the cliff. Because this was Dunwich's memory. And memory, you've learned, is the last thing to fade. You step in. The grass changes texture beneath your boots. Softer, patchier. You imagine cobbles beneath the soil, worn flat by generations of boots and hooves and dragging barrels. This was where life happened, where people bargained, argued, flirted, stole, gave blessings, spilled soup. Markets are where towns remember who they are. And Dunwich had a good one. You see it now, not clearly, but in flickers. A woman hawking sea salt in tiny cloth bundles. A boy selling eels from a wooden pail. A priest arguing about the price of ink. The baker with ash on his apron and no patience for anyone without coin. The smells come next. Fish, of course, always fish. But also warm barley bread. Damp wool. Beeswax. Something roasted. Something spilled. This is where you might have stood on a Thursday afternoon in 1293, clutching a purse with one good silver penny and two bent copper ones, trying to decide whether to spend it on a meat pie or save it for socks. You would have chosen the pie. You always do. A breeze stirs the air, and for a moment, it feels like something is brushing past your shoulder. Not ominous, not ghostly, just busy. This was a place of motion, of necessity. People came here with needs and they left with stories, good ones and bad. And sometimes they didn't leave at all, because the market square was also where justice was performed. The pillory stood just over there, near that dip in the earth. You walk toward it slowly, imagining the crowd gathering. Someone accused of shorting weights or stealing turnips or speaking ill of a constable. Not crimes of passion, crimes of survival. Dunwich's justice was swift, but not always cruel. Public shaming, not execution. Unless you insulted the church. That was different. You sit on a patch of stone half swallowed by grass. It might have been part of a stall or a step or even a fountain rim. Either way, it's still here, still waiting. You listen. There's a sound. So faint you might miss it. A bell? No, not the church kind. It's sharper. A vendor's bell. Someone announcing fresh fruit or rare cloth or soap from the city. You blink and it's gone. But you felt it. A flicker of commerce. A ghost of demand. Historians argue about the layout of Dunwich's market. Some say it was spread out along 3 streets. Others insist it was tightly packed, clustered around the town cross. The truth is probably somewhere in between, but the feeling of it remains here, crowded, anxious, vibrant. They also debate its death. Some claim the market died with the harbor. Others believe it lingered, limping along well into the 1500s. And then one day no one showed up. No bread, no eels, no ink, just silence. And it never left. You rise and walk a slow circle, trying to retrace the footpaths, the stall rows, the flow of conversation. And then you find something. A coin. Not old, modern. A pound. Probably dropped by a hiker or some bored teenager trying to film ghosts for TikTok. But you pick it up anyway. Feels strange in your palm. Out of place. Too shiny. Too now. You set it gently on a flat stone, next to a smear of lichen that might once have been the corner of a bread stall. Let the past keep its currency. You step back and look around once more. The square has no walls, no roof, no heartbeat anymore, but it still offers space, still waits for someone to ask a question. And so you do. What did you want to be? The wind doesn't answer, but something in your chest does. Permanent. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? No town ever wants to vanish. They all want to last, to outlive storms and politics and fashion trends. But Dunwich didn't. Not quite. You walk out of the square with slower steps than when you entered. The past doesn't grab you, it just lets you go gently, like a shopkeeper closing up for the night. You climb a slight rise, more slope than hill, until the ground levels again. Up here, the breeze is stronger, and the horizon opens like a sigh. It would have been a good place to build something visible, something proud. And they did, because this is where the town hall once stood. Or the equivalent of one, anyway. Medieval towns didn't always have neat civic centers with fluorescent lights and file cabinets. But they had gathering places. Rooms where disputes were settled and policies whispered into law over cups of weak ale. And here in Dunwich, this was the place. You kneel by a scattered line of stones barely poking through the grass. There's no plaque, no fence, no photo opportunity. Just the faint outline of a square. And yet, it feels like administration. You can practically hear the sighing of a clerk with ink-stained sleeves and an ulcer forming from too many grain disputes. You imagine the council, wealthy landowners in stiff wool tunics and terrible beards, arguing over whether pigs should be allowed to roam free through the streets. Again and again, every week. This was where things got done, or at least talked about. You sit cross-legged on what might have been the threshold. The sky above is low and blue-gray, like wet linen. The sun's gone, and the dark is setting in properly now. But you don't light anything. The twilight feels appropriate, neutral, civil. A candle would be too dramatic. You think about the decisions made here: shipping permissions, tax levies, crop quotas. The mundane machinery of town life. Not romantic, not tragic, just essential. And in the end, all those discussions, those proclamations and disputes, they couldn't stop the sea. You lean back on your hands, feeling the prickly scrub under your palms, and imagine a meeting in the late 1300s. The mayor pacing, someone clutching a report from the priory, another reading aloud letters from Norwich. Panic in every line. The waves have taken 12 more rods of land. The eastern boundary is gone. The grain storehouse is threatened. We must act. But what could they do? Rebuild the cliff? Scold the tide? Dig moats in reverse? Dunwich's leadership didn't collapse in corruption or violence. It just slowly became obsolete. Not for lack of trying, for lack of leverage. A nearby gull shrieks into the wind, breaking your reverie. You watch it wheel over the scrub, then vanish into the thickening dark. Everything here feels faded, but in a soft way. Like an old ledger kept too long in a damp cellar, still legible but only just. You rise and circle what would have been the walls. 6 paces. Turn. 7 paces. Turn. Your breath catches at one corner, where the ground gives slightly underfoot. You kneel. There's a carved stone, cracked and moss-choked. Barely a letter left on it. Maybe a boundary marker. Maybe a stone that once read public entrance. Now it says nothing, and yet it still stands. You run your fingers over the worn surface and feel something. Not information, just intent. A will to remain. You think about the people who served here, the scribes, the messengers, the endless paperwork. You wonder if one of them ever slipped an extra word into the minutes just for fun. If anyone secretly doodled in the margins of a legal ruling. Maybe someone once wrote a joke no one ever saw. Something about sheep and taxes. It's comforting in a way to think they weren't all solemn. That somewhere between town decrees and property disputes, there were human moments. Sneezes, boredom, bad jokes, life. You take one last lap around the site before moving on. As you do, you spot something odd. A flash of color in the grass. You stoop to check. There's a scrap of blue plastic. A modern candy wrapper, crinkled and sun-bleached. You laugh. Of course, bureaucracy leaves trash. Even across centuries. You tuck it into your pocket. Not out of reverence, just respect. Let the town forget itself. You won't add to the noise. You glance back one more time before continuing. The shape of the building is already fading behind you. The council's work is long over. But for a brief moment, here on this bluff, you remembered the paperwork of survival. And that matters. The path narrows again, winding between clumps of gorse and heather. The plants snag your coat and whisper across your legs, like they're trying to hold you back, or maybe just remind you they were here first. And suddenly it's there, not a ruin, not a ghost, but a doorway, standing, alone. It leads to nothing, opens onto air, and holds up precisely no roof or wall. But it's real, stone, weathered, arching with effort. Its top lintel leans slightly, like it's tired of being asked to hold history upright. You stop. You don't walk through. Not yet, because you know what this was. This was St. Peter's. Another church, yes, but not just another ruin. St. Peter's was Dunwich's heartbeat once, long before All Saints lingered at the cliff. This was where the baptisms echoed off stone walls that no longer exist, where the weddings filled aisles now grown over with grass. This was where funerals passed by candlelight, the wax dripping onto flagstones buried now somewhere deep beneath your boots. And this door is all that remains. You approach it slowly, unsure whether to feel reverent or ridiculous. After all, what is a door without a building? Without thresholds or sanctuary or people to hold it open? It's a memory, a very specific one. You lay a hand on the frame. It's cold, rough, covered in moss that's trying its best to erase the centuries one lichen cell at a time. But it's here, stubborn, like so much of Dunwich. And like the rest of Dunwich, it's still watching. You step through it, and nothing happens. No flash of insight, no echo of choir boys, just air, just wind, just you on the other side, in a clearing that used to be sacred, now left to the sheep in silence. You wonder how many walked through this doorway before you. How many priests? How many mothers? How many children, barefoot and fidgeting, tugging at the hem of a parent's robe? You wonder if anyone ever stood here the way you do now, alone, curious, out of time. You sit just beyond the arch, on a low rise where the choir might have stood. The view is surprisingly open. Farther off, you can almost see where the coastline begins its retreat, where the land gives way to hunger. It's quiet here, a thick kind of quiet, not heavy exactly, just deliberate. You get the sense that the doorway is holding it in, like a wine bottle corked, not out of preservation, but out of deference. You close your eyes and let the church reassemble itself around you, not stone by stone, but sound by sound. Footsteps on ancient tile, pages turning in a lectionary, a throat clearing in the third pew. You're not dreaming, you're remembering, and you weren't even here. That's the strange power of places like this. They teach you how to grieve something you never knew you lost. St. Peter's was one of the first to fall, not to the sea but to the storm. A great gale in the late 1200s tore the roof away. Floods collapsed one of the walls. The congregation scattered. Repairs were attempted, but eventually, the sea decided the matter for everyone. Some historians say the nave was still used for open-air gatherings after the collapse, that people stood in rain and wind to hear a sermon out of habit, not hope. That's very Dunwich, tenacious, slightly soggy, faithful to a fault. You lie back on the grass, head tilted just enough to see the edge of the doorway still standing. Cuts the sky like punctuation, a reminder that something was said here once, even if the words are gone. You think about building something that lasts, and how that's a myth. Nothing lasts. Not really. Not churches. Not cities. Not bones. But sometimes a doorway does. And sometimes someone walks through it, not to enter but to remember. You close your eyes again and let the grass cradle your skull. The wind moves gently now, like someone drawing a line across your forehead with a cold thumb. Not unpleasant, just distant. And then, for a moment, it's there, a faint murmur, not from your ears, but from the air itself. A line of scripture, maybe, a line from someone's diary, a line of history that never made it into the books. You can't quite hear the words, but the shape of them is enough. You whisper back, "Still here," and then you get up, brush the moss from your back, and step through the doorway again, this time in reverse. Not because you expect something to happen, but because some exits deserve acknowledgement. The wind has changed. It's cooler now, sharper, with that briny edge that reminds you the sea is close. Closer than it was, closer than it should be. And it's not just the wind. The ground beneath your feet feels thinner, not unstable but uncertain, as if you're walking not on soil, but on memory loosely disguised as earth. You descend a slight slope. The grass here is sparse, patchy, as if even the plants aren't sure whether they belong. And then you see it, a fence, not intact, not even close, just 3 leaning posts and a suggestion of wire, rusted to lace. But it marks something, a boundary, a warning. You duck beneath it without hesitation, because you already know what lies ahead. The cliff, but not just any cliff. The one that has eaten churches, that has devoured roads, that has swallowed entire streets like they were never drawn on any map. You creep forward, boots finding gravel now, not grass. The crunch underfoot is sudden, alarming, even, and loud in the gathering dark. You slow down, and then you stop, just a few steps from the edge. There it is, black air, empty space, a vertical nothingness where land should be. You exhale, and the wind pulls it away. Below, you can hear the waves. Not crashing, this isn't a cinematic moment, but a low, relentless churning. The slow grind of erosion, of undoing, of the sea reclaiming, because that's what it's always been doing here. Not attacking, just taking back. You inch closer, carefully, respectfully. The earth crumbles in places. Whole sections of Dunwich lie beneath you now. Homes, cobblestones, perhaps even entire rooms still holding the shape of their former lives. Historians have speculated that if you could dive deep enough, you'd find wine bottles still sealed, pews still upright, locks still rusted shut on doors that no longer open. They call this stretch of coast England's Atlantis. And it's not hyperbole, because what you're looking at isn't just water. It's absence, a physical, wet void where a city used to be. And yet, you can almost see it, not with your eyes exactly, but in the outline of the air. A tower here, a roofline there, a ghost road extending out into the waves like a tongue trying to speak a language it forgot mid-sentence. You sit, careful not to lean forward too far. Your legs dangle just above the slope, and your fingers dig slightly into the soil behind you for balance. It's damp, loose. You don't linger, but you listen. The sea below gurgles and slaps and mutters. And somewhere, impossibly, you hear a bell. Faint, too faint, but there. They say that when the tide is just right, and the sky is just heavy enough, you can hear the bell of all saints ringing beneath the waves. No one knows if it's real. It doesn't matter. Truth isn't always necessary for a place to be remembered. You whisper a question, not expecting an answer. How much more do you want? And the sea, predictably, says nothing. Because it's not angry. It's not cruel. It's just hungry. You stand, brushing damp soil from your hands. The fence post to your right groans softly as the wind shifts again. A gull screeches in the distance. Somewhere inland, a dog barks once, then falls silent. You step back, just one pace, because standing too long on the edge of a place like this, you start to think strange thoughts. about what you'd leave behind, about what might remain of you should the ground give way. Not your phone, not your wallet, but something older, a feeling, a shape, a breath. You turn and walk back into the grass. The cliff doesn't pull you. It doesn't have to. You'll remember. You always will. Because there's something about staring into a hole where history once lived that makes you realize how little separates permanence from myth. You've left the edge behind, but it hasn't left you. Even now, as your boots press deeper into softer soil and the horizon becomes trees again instead of air, there's a part of you that's still listening for the sea, still braced for a sound that means the ground is giving way behind you. It's irrational, but Dunwich teaches you that rationality has never really had the final say. You find yourself on a narrower path now, barely a trail. Brambles encroach from both sides, tugging at your coat like old hands. The wind is quieter here, less sharp, more tangled in branches and undergrowth, and ahead just barely visible through the foliage. The watchtower, what's left of it, a stone base, square and squat, its upper levels long since fallen or torn down. Only 3 of its 4 corners remain, giving it the awkward silhouette of something half-remembered. You approach slowly. The doorway is still intact and unlocked. Of course it is. You duck inside. The air smells of damp earth, old smoke, and something faintly metallic, like iron nails rusting in a forgotten drawer. The floor is uneven, half flagstone, half moss. You let your eyes adjust. It's a single chamber. No windows, just slits in the stone for observation. This wasn't a place to live. It was a place to watch. And oh, what they must have seen. The tower was built late, long after Dunwich's prime. Some say it was erected as a warning station. Others claim it served as a customs lookout for smugglers or approaching ships. A few believe it was a sort of lighthouse without the light, just a man and a torch and enough boredom to fill 100 notebooks. You sit on a flat stone, likely where the watchman's bench once stood, and you try to imagine a life measured in horizon lines. Imagine standing here for hours, every day, in every weather, staring at a sea you couldn't stop, only witness. Storms rolling in from the east, boats failing to return, coastlines eaten away inch by inch. You wonder what kind of person stayed in a job like this. Someone dutiful, desperate, deeply introverted? Maybe all 3. There's graffiti on the wall. Modern, obviously. Scrawled in charcoal or maybe marker. Half faded. It's still falling. You trace the letters with your fingertip. They're old. Not ancient, but older than you. And somehow it's the perfect inscription. Because Dunwich is still falling. Not visibly, not spectacularly, but slowly, secretly. The way sand forgets how to be land. The way towns learn to let go of their borders. You lie back on the stone. It's uncomfortable, but appropriate. You stare up at the hole where the roof once was, open now to a strip of grayish sky that doesn't seem in the mood to clear. A gull floats lazily overhead, indifferent. Somewhere in the underbrush outside, a rabbit darts through dry leaves. You think about the job of watching, of witnessing, of being the person who says, "This is happening," even when no one listens. That was the watchman's task. And maybe, in some strange way, it's yours too. To remember, to imagine, to retell. You sit up slowly, joints creaking just a little, and take one final glance around. The room is empty but not hollow. There's something still echoing here. A cough. A mutter. The scrape of a boot against stone. Memory, maybe, or just your imagination, which, in a place like Dunwich, is much the same thing. You step outside, blinking in the returning light, and look back once. The tower doesn't wave goodbye, but it doesn't vanish either. And that's enough. The sky has dropped lower now. Not literally, of course, but it feels heavier, as though someone's pulled the clouds down by hand to muffle the world a little. The air carries that damp wool scent, coastal fog mixed with churned earth and the kind of silence that stretches. You follow the tree line as it curves gently west, toward what was once the heart of the town's busiest trade, the shipyard, or rather, the ghost of it. There are no cranes, no hulls, no docks, just warped timber buried in bramble, and patches of flattened ground where men once heaved barrels and shouted over wind and waves. A few stones remain, forming a half-moon outline of what might have been a slipway, or a wall, or a line no one dared cross without a job to do. You crouch beside one of the timbers. It's gray and soft, worn down not by tools, but by time. This would have been oak, strong, heavy, chosen not for beauty, but endurance. There's a nail still in it, a square-cut thing, rusted to the color of dried blood. You don't touch it, you just sit with it. This yard used to be loud, constant motion, the crack of hammers, the grind of rope, the creak of pulleys lifting hulls like sleeping whales. It was the sound of a town earning its life, one plank at a time. Dunwich was a port. Before the sea swallowed its harbor mouth, before silt choked the inlet, before the storms redirected every promise elsewhere, it was a working town. Ships were built here, small ones for fishing, larger ones for trade, and once or twice warships. You stand and walk the perimeter of the old yard. It isn't large by modern standards, but everything about it feels wide, open in that something used to be here way. You picture men stripped to the waist, tools hanging from belts, singing or swearing or both. You imagine a boy running messages between masters and apprentices, feet kicking up sawdust. And you think about loss, not personal loss, not dramatic, but the kind that creeps in when usefulness fades, because the end didn't come here with fire or flood, came with irrelevance. The sea retreated, the sandbars shifted, the harbor stopped being deep enough, and ships stopped coming, not all at once, but like a conversation that slowly stops making sense. You reach what might have been the dry dock, just a depression in the earth now, choked with weeds and a bit of rusted wire fencing. You step into it, half expecting the ground to remember the weight of a keel, the scrape of tar and pitch. But it doesn't. It just holds you, and maybe that's enough. You sit on a mossed-over block, once part of a foundation or hoist. A small spider scuttles across your boot. You let it be. They say some of the last ships made in Dunwich were sent north, to Yarmouth, to Newcastle. That the builders were proud of them, even if the world had already moved on. No one builds ships here anymore, but every so often someone finds a nail, or a chisel blade, or a coin stamped with a guild mark no one remembers. And for a moment it comes back. The clamor, the purpose, the salt-stained pride of labor done well. You lie back, arms folded beneath your head, and look at the sky, still heavy, still quiet. You imagine it full of sails, not white but brown and patched, and flapping with the kind of urgency only trade can inspire. The shipyard doesn't whisper to you. It has nothing to prove. But there's a dignity here, not in the ruins, but in the fact of having once mattered. You rise again, and as you walk away you hear it, the faintest creak, wood shifting, a rope pulling taut, or maybe just the wind remembering how to build something. Your path now bends inland, if only slightly. The sea is still close, always close in Dunwich, but here the sound of it softens. Less crash, more whisper. You walk between low mounds, where grass grows in tufts like half-formed thoughts. The air carries a trace of smoke, wood smoke, maybe, or just the scent of burnt things long past. And then you see it, a ring of stones, shallow, uneven, some cracked, others half-buried. but unmistakable in their intention. This was the market circle. You almost missed it, because it doesn't announce itself. No sign, no monument, just this quiet arrangement, like a gathering of friends who refuse to leave even after the party's long over. You step into the circle, and immediately you're not alone. You're surrounded by ghosts, not of people but of transactions. A woman arguing over the price of smoked herring. A child tugging at a sleeve, begging for sweetened oats. A monk examining apples with the suspicion of a man who's seen too many worms in his time. This place was alive, loud, messy, and human. You wander past the center stone, a larger slab with a wide crack splitting it down the middle. The pitching stone, they called it, where vendors would rest their baskets or crates, or, occasionally, stand to deliver announcements when the town crier had a sore throat. You sit there now. It's not especially comfortable, but that's not the point. From here you can imagine it all. The stalls made of canvas and hope, the crates full of salt, the barrels of eel. The cloth dyed a little too bright, promising more than it delivered. You imagine a thief slipping through the crowd, hand deft as a prayer, plucking coins and slipping away. You imagine a bard trying to trade a song for soup. You imagine life, messy, loud, repetitive life. Markets are honest that way. They don't pretend. They're where you see people for what they are. Hungry, tired, clever, worried, hopeful, all within the same half hour. There's a rumor that in Dunwich's last market season, just before the floods really began, someone carved a message into the base of the pitching stone. A warning, or maybe just a joke. You crouch to look, and there it is, faint, nearly erased by time and lichen, but readable. Sell while you can. The sea doesn't haggle. You smile, because it's funny, and true, and so incredibly Dunwich. You sit a while longer, watching the wind chase leaves in lazy spirals. Somewhere nearby, a rabbit darts through undergrowth, startled by your stillness. You wonder if this spot has seen more conversation than any other in town. Probably. And none of those conversations were about history. They were about weather, about fish, about missing buttons and stubborn daughters, and the price of grain being bloody unfair this week. And that, somehow, is comforting. Dunwich wasn't always tragic. It was once mundane, a place where things were bought and sold and gossiped about. And then, bit by bit, it wasn't. You rise from the stone, knees cracking slightly, and take one last look at the ring. The stones don't shine. They don't mourn. They just remain. Because even when history forgets why something mattered, it rarely forgets where. There's a tree growing in the middle of a ruin. That's the first thing you see. Not the ruin, though the remnants of walls do catch your eye, forming a square that once held lives. But it's the tree that dominates. Its trunk thick, roots like arthritic fingers pushing through stone, bark riddled with moss, branches reaching out in gestures both generous and slightly desperate. You step closer, and the walls come into focus. Not tall, but unmistakably domestic, this was once a home. You cross what used to be the threshold, now just a dip in the foundation, and pause. Inside, the tree looms. Its roots have broken the floor. One of them has lifted a stone slab entirely, leaving it hanging at an angle like a loose tooth. Ivy creeps up what remains of the rear wall, and where windows once allowed light in, there are now only gaps where the sky peers through. And yet, this feels lived in. Not now, but once. You crouch and press a hand to the floor, or what's left of it. It's cool, damp. You imagine a fire in the corner, a stool overturned, a blanket drying by the hearth. This was someone's home. Not a famous person, just a person. You take in the space. This modest 2 rooms, maybe 3. A small hearth on one side, the faint outline of a staircase base, though the stairs themselves are long gone. You wonder if the upstairs ever really existed, or if it was more aspirational than structural. They say Dunwich once had hundreds of homes like this, all packed along narrow lanes, roofs nearly touching, neighbors close enough to hear each other breathe. And now, most are gone, not collapsed, swallowed. The sea didn't just take roads and churches and market stalls, it took rooms. Rooms with names etched into door frames, with stains on the wood from spilled broth and childhood drawings scratched into beams. No one remembers who lived in this one, but you want to. You imagine a name, Edith, not because there's evidence, but because she fits. A woman with 2 children and a sharp wit. The kind who baked when anxious and had an opinion about everything from fishing taxes to how the bishop pronounced Latin. You imagine her standing right where you are now, scolding someone for tracking mud inside. You whisper, "Sorry, Edith," and step back outside. The garden, yes, this was definitely a garden, is overgrown, but you can see the outline of where it once lived. A low stone border now broken. What might have been a path made of flat stones, mostly buried, and there, along the edge, lavender. Still growing, still fragrant. You run a hand gently across its top and bring your fingers to your nose. Smells real, not nostalgic, not ghostly, just alive. Something in you softens, because not everything in Dunwich is a ruin. Some things adapt. Even when the sea presses closer, even when the records vanish, even when the walls fall, you sit on the edge of what was once the front step and let your feet rest in the grass. The tree sways above you, branches shifting with the wind, casting shadows across the stone like fingers threading through memory. You could stay here for hours, but you won't, because Dunwich doesn't let you linger too long in comfort. It's a place of movement, of erosion, of inevitable change. You stand again, one last look at Edith's house, even if that wasn't really her name, and then you walk on. Behind you, the tree continues its slow, patient work, breaking stone, anchoring memory, surviving. You're walking uphill again, though barely enough to notice. The air is shifting, not colder, just denser. Like the world is pressing its finger to your lips and whispering, "Quiet now." Ahead, tucked between a crescent of trees and the remnants of a stone path, is something unmistakable, even after all this time. A well, circular, low, its rim made of lichen-crusted bricks, some cracked, some missing. A crooked wooden cover lies beside it, half-rotted, the rusted iron handle flaking red into the grass. You pause at its edge. There's no rope, no bucket, just darkness, not dramatic darkness. Not the kind you stare into and feel yourself unravel, but a still, steady dark, like sleep, or thought, or something waiting. This is St. Michael's Well, named for the church that once stood nearby. Long gone now, the church fell to the sea sometime in the early 1400s. The records say it happened slowly, walls cracking, roof sagging, the choir collapsing in on itself. Some even say the altar stood alone for years, like a shipwreck stuck upright in sand, long after everything else was gone. But the well remained, and people kept using it. For drinking, for washing, for ritual. You sit beside it, fingertips brushing the cool brick. They say this well was different, that its water ran deeper than the others in town, that it stayed cool even in high summer, that women whispered prayers into it during childbirth, and soldiers tossed in coins before leaving for campaigns they'd likely never return from. Some said it was holy, others said it was just clean. You peer down into it, but you see only shadow. You listen, nothing. But isn't that something? That silence can still feel like it's full. You lie on your stomach, just for a moment, and rest your ear against the stone rim. And you hear it. Not voices, not ghosts, not the sea, but a soft, persistent drip. Somewhere deep below, water still moves. You smile a little surprised, because after everything, the storms, the erosion, the churches slipping into the waves, this has endured. Not loudly, not triumphantly, just still here. The grass around the well grows thick. It's a different shade from the rest. Greener, fuller, as if the soil still remembers being fed by hands and footsteps and stories. You wonder what else was whispered into this place. Wishes, confessions, lies? Maybe all of it. Maybe someone, once, leaned in and whispered, "I don't love him," or "Please let the baby live," or "If I don't come back, remember me." And maybe the well kept every word, not because it meant to, but because there was nowhere else for those words to go. You sit up again, brushing moss from your sleeves, and take one last glance down. Still just shadow, still just water, still just memory held in a stone throat too old to speak back. You reach into your pocket, searching for something, anything, and find a smooth pebble you didn't know you'd picked up earlier. Without thinking, you drop it in. No sound, but it felt right. You walk away slowly, back onto the path. Behind you, the well waits, not forgotten, not honored, just present. A mouth that never needed to speak. Your path now bends inland, if only slightly. The sea is still close, always close in Dunwich, but here the sound of it softens. Less crash, more whisper. You walk between low mounds, where grass grows in tufts like half-formed thoughts. The air carries a trace of smoke, wood smoke, maybe, or just the scent of burnt things long past. And then you see it, a ring of stones, shallow, uneven, some cracked, others half-buried, but unmistakable in their intention. This was the market circle. You almost missed it, because it doesn't announce itself. No sign, no monument, just this quiet arrangement, like a gathering of friends who refuse to leave even after the party's long over. You step into the circle, and immediately you're not alone. You're surrounded by ghosts, not of people but of transactions. A woman arguing over the price of smoked herring. A child tugging at a sleeve, begging for sweetened oats. A monk examining apples with the suspicion of a man who's seen too many worms in his time. This place was alive, loud, messy, and human. You wander past the center stone, a larger slab with a wide crack splitting it down the middle. The pitching stone, they called it, where vendors would rest their baskets or crates, or, occasionally, stand to deliver announcements when the town crier had a sore throat. You sit there now. It's not especially comfortable, but that's not the point. From here you can imagine it all. The stalls made of canvas and hope, the crates full of salt, the barrels of eel. The cloth dyed a little too bright, promising more than it delivered. You imagine a thief slipping through the crowd, hand deft as a prayer, plucking coins and slipping away. You imagine a bard trying to trade a song for soup. You imagine life. Messy, loud, repetitive life. Markets are honest that way. They don't pretend. They're where you see people for what they are. Hungry, tired, clever, worried, hopeful, all within the same half hour. There's a rumor that in Dunwich's last market season, just before the floods really began, someone carved a message into the base of the pitching stone. A warning, or maybe just a joke. You crouch to look, and there it is, faint, nearly erased by time and lichen, but readable. Sell while you can. The sea doesn't haggle. You smile, because it's funny, and true, and so incredibly Dunwich. You sit a while longer, watching the wind chase leaves in lazy spirals. Somewhere nearby, A rabbit darts through undergrowth, startled by your stillness. You wonder if this spot has seen more conversation than any other in town. Probably. And none of those conversations were about history. They were about weather, about fish, about missing buttons and stubborn daughters, and the price of grain being bloody unfair this week. And that somehow is comforting. Dunwich wasn't always tragic. It was once mundane, a place where things were bought and sold and gossiped about. And then, bit by bit, it wasn't. You rise from the stone, knees cracking slightly, and take one last look at the ring. The stones don't shine. They don't mourn. They just remain. Because even when history forgets why something mattered, it rarely forgets where. There's a tree growing in the middle of a ruin. That's the first thing you see. Not the ruin, though the remnants of walls do catch your eye, forming a square that once held lives. But it's the tree that dominates. Its trunk thick, roots like arthritic fingers pushing through stone, bark riddled with moss, branches reaching out in gestures both generous and slightly desperate. You step closer, and the walls come into focus. Not tall, but unmistakably domestic, this was once a home. You cross what used to be the threshold, now just a dip in the foundation, and pause. Inside, the tree looms. Its roots have broken the floor. One of them has lifted a stone slab entirely, leaving it hanging at an angle like a loose tooth. Ivy creeps up what remains of the rear wall, and where windows once allowed light in, there are now only gaps where the sky peers through. And yet, this feels lived in. Not now, but once. You crouch and press a hand to the floor, or what's left of it. It's cool, damp. You imagine a fire in the corner, a stool overturned, a blanket drying by the hearth. This was someone's home, not a famous person, just a person. You take in the space. This modest 2 rooms, maybe 3. A small hearth on one side, the faint outline of a staircase base, though the stairs themselves are long gone. You wonder if the upstairs ever really existed, or if it was more aspirational than structural. They say Dunwich once had hundreds of homes like this, all packed along narrow lanes, roofs nearly touching, neighbors close enough to hear each other breathe. And now, most are gone, not collapsed, swallowed. The sea didn't just take roads and churches and market stalls. It took rooms. Rooms with names etched into door frames, with stains on the wood from spilled broth and childhood drawings scratched into beams. No one remembers who lived in this one, but you want to. You imagine a name, Edith, not because there's evidence, but because she fits. A woman with 2 children and a sharp wit. The kind who baked when anxious and had an opinion about everything from fishing taxes to how the bishop pronounced Latin. You imagine her standing right where you are now, scolding someone for tracking mud inside. You whisper, "Sorry, Edith," and step back outside. The garden, yes, this was definitely a garden, is overgrown, but you can see the outline of where it once lived. A low stone border now broken. What might have been a path made of flat stones, mostly buried. And there, along the edge, lavender. Still growing. Still fragrant. You run a hand gently across its top and bring your fingers to your nose. Smells real. Not nostalgic. Not ghostly. Just alive. Something in you softens. Because not everything in Dunwich is a ruin. Some things adapt. Even when the sea presses closer, even when the records vanish, even when the walls fall, you sit on the edge of what was once the front step and let your feet rest in the grass. The tree sways above you, branches shifting with the wind, casting shadows across the stone like fingers threading through memory. You could stay here for hours, but you won't, because Dunwich doesn't let you linger too long in comfort. It's a place of movement, of erosion, of inevitable change. You stand again, one last look at Edith's house, even if that wasn't really her name, and then you walk on. Behind you, the tree continues its slow, patient work, breaking stone, anchoring memory, surviving. You're walking uphill again, though barely enough to notice. The air is shifting, not colder, just denser. Like the world is pressing its finger to your lips and whispering, "Quiet now." Ahead, tucked between a crescent of trees and the remnants of a stone path, is something unmistakable, even after all this time. A well, circular, low, its rim made of lichen-crusted bricks, some cracked, some missing. A crooked wooden cover lies beside it, half-rotted, the rusted iron handle flaking red into the grass. You pause at its edge. There's no rope, no bucket, just darkness. Not dramatic darkness. Not the kind you stare into and feel yourself unravel, but a still, steady dark, like sleep, or thought, or something waiting. This is St. Michael's Well, named for the church that once stood nearby. Long gone now, the church fell to the sea sometime in the early 1400s. The records say it happened slowly, walls cracking, roof sagging, the choir collapsing in on itself. Some even say the altar stood alone for years, like a shipwreck stuck upright in sand, long after everything else was gone. But the well remained, and people kept using it. For drinking, for washing, for ritual. You sit beside it, fingertips brushing the cool brick. They say this well was different, that its water ran deeper than the others in town, that it stayed cool even in high summer, that women whispered prayers into it during childbirth, and soldiers tossed in coins before leaving for campaigns they'd likely never return from. Some said it was holy, others said it was just clean. You peer down into it, but you see only shadow. You listen, nothing. But isn't that something? That silence can still feel like it's full. You lie on your stomach, just for a moment, and rest your ear against the stone rim. And you hear it. Not voices, not ghosts, not the sea, but a soft, persistent drip. Somewhere deep below, water still moves. You smile a little surprised, because after everything, the storms, the erosion, the churches slipping into the waves, this has endured. Not loudly, not triumphantly, just still here. The grass around the well grows thick. It's a different shade from the rest. Greener, fuller, as if the soil still remembers being fed by hands and footsteps and stories. You wonder what else was whispered into this place. Wishes, confessions, lies? Maybe all of it. Maybe someone, once, leaned in and whispered, "I don't love him," or "Please let the baby live," or "If I don't come back, remember me." And maybe the well kept every word, not because it meant to, but because there was nowhere else for those words to go. You sit up again, brushing moss from your sleeves, and take one last glance down. Still just shadow, still just water, still just memory held in a stone throat too old to speak back. You reach into your pocket, searching for something, anything, and find a smooth pebble you didn't know you'd picked up earlier. Without thinking, you drop it in. No sound, but it felt right. You walk away slowly, back onto the path. Behind you, the well waits, not forgotten, not honored, just present, a mouth that never needed to speak. You move further inland now, though inland in Dunwich is a slippery word. The sea always finds a way to follow. You can still smell it, salt and silt and something older, more vegetal, like rotting kelp or seaweed braided into time. But ahead, the smell changes. Wood smoke, charcoal. You find the source quickly, a blackened patch of ground, encircled by crumbling brick. The outline of a hearth is still visible, and nearby, scorched beams lie like bones. You've stumbled into what remains of the bakehouse district, or what used to be. Most towns had them, communal ovens for those too poor or crowded to bake at home. A necessary kind of socialism baked right into the village structure. You walk slowly between the outlines of what were once open-air ovens. Brick domes now collapsed. Fire pits filled with wind-blown leaves. But the smell, that unmistakable ghost of heat and flour, still lingers. And memory begins to fill the air. You hear it before you see it. Laughter, or rather, the echo of laughter. Women, mostly, chatting while loaves browned. Children darting between legs. Flour on every sleeve. Someone humming a tune you almost, but not quite, recognize. You crouch near a low stone basin. A communal dough trough. Cracked, but intact. You run your fingers along its edge and feel a faint depression, worn smooth by use. Imagine the hands. Calloused. Strong. Knowing exactly how many turns it takes for a dough to tell you it's ready. You lean closer, and you smell it. Not the smoke now, but the bread. That deep, primal comfort, wheat and fire and something rising. The kind of smell that rewires your body and tells your stomach, you're home now. This place was the belly of Dunwich. Its warmth, its nourishment, its gossip factory. They didn't just bake here. They talked, traded secrets like herbs, shared stories, complaints, suspicions, passed down recipes and curses alike. One tale you remember, a woman, Marjorie or Marin, was said to bake loaves so perfectly shaped that even the priest suspected witchcraft. She insisted it was just patience. And lard, lots of lard. No one could ever quite replicate her crust. You smile at the absurdity of it. But then again, history is made from absurdities. You explore further and find what might have been a pantry. The low outline of a storage hut, sunken in the middle like a collapsed chest. Inside, shards of pottery poke through dirt. A handle, a sliver of glazed blue. You imagine shelves lined with barley, sacks of rye, earthen jars of honey hardened with time. Someone lived here, not just baked. Because that's the thing about ruins. We think of them as places where things stopped. But really, they're where everything happened. Births, fights, burned crusts, tears in the soup, kissed foreheads, dough that refused to rise, loaves stolen by dogs, accidents blamed on ghosts, children too small to reach the table, stretching their arms anyway. You sit in the doorway of the old bakehouse and feel the heat that isn't there. Not on your skin, but behind your ribs. Because there's something about a kitchen, even a ruined one, that knows how to hold the memory of its own warmth. A breeze passes through, picking up dust and flour dust ghosts alike. You imagine Dunwich on a cold morning, and the line of villagers outside this place, holding baskets, rubbing hands, already arguing about whose turn it was. You picture someone stepping out, wiping her hands on an apron, calling the first name on the list. Edith. Yes, that name again. You smile, then stand. The hearth has cooled. The ashes have long since blown away, but the shape of it all remains. And that sometimes is enough. The ground turns uneven beneath your feet, not steep, but lumpy, like something once tried to rise here and failed. Small hillocks, awkward dips. It feels less like natural terrain and more like the afterthought of memory. You slow down instinctively, because here the air feels complicated. This is where Dunwich buried its secrets. The leper house, or what's left of it. There are no signs, no carved stones, no plaques honoring the afflicted. Just a partial wall overgrown with brambles and a shallow foundation filled with weeds that look a little too intentional. You stand at the edge. It's not fear that holds you. It's awareness. The kind that creeps in when you realize you're not just walking through history, but through exclusion. Leper houses weren't quite hospitals, and they weren't quite prisons. They were places to be hidden, to be out of sight, to reduce discomfort. Dunwich had one like many medieval towns, a low structure with separate quarters. A chapel, of course, and a walled yard where residents could take air without taking offense. They lived on alms. They rang bells if they had to walk through town. They were, in every sense, separated. You step forward, crunching softly over dried leaves. The grass is high here, taller than usual, like it's trying to cover something, or protect it. You crouch near what might have been a corner of the chapel. A few angled stones, half sunk, half proud. You reach out but don't touch. The stones feel private, like they're not yours to hold. They say the leper house burned. Whether by accident or fear is unclear. Some records claim it was lightning. Others whisper it was torched, quietly, deliberately. When the sea started creeping closer and people began looking for reasons to be spared, you stand slowly, brushing your knees, and you feel it, the absence, not just of the building, but of stories. No names, no patient logs, just this faint impression in the ground and a half-muttered tradition of unease. Still, you try. You imagine a woman here, name unknown, maybe 20, maybe 50, her hands wrapped in linen, her eyes watching gulls cross the sky. She hums because the body remembers music even when the tongue forgets it. She's not angry, just tired. She knew her world shrank when the sores appeared. But even here, even in this half-forgotten shell of a building, she laughed. Once, maybe twice. You sit where a bench might have been. The grass shifts in the breeze. Something clicks in the underbrush, a beetle maybe, a small creature still living where the larger ones were once pushed aside. There's a strange quiet here, not the hush of reverence, but the pause of discomfort. Even now, the land doesn't quite know what to do with this memory. You take a deep breath and whisper, "I see you," not loudly, not theatrically, just enough for the wind to carry. Because if no one names the forgotten, they don't become ghosts. They become nothing. You rise, and as you leave, you glance back one last time. No sign follows you, no apparition, no echo, just that silence again, and a wildflower blooming in the broken chapel's heart. You're further inland now, if such a thing can exist in a town like Dunwich, where the sea has rearranged the idea of distance. The wind dies here not because it's blocked, but because it chooses to. The air feels older, denser, like breath held too long. And then you see it. Not a ruin, not a wall, but something stranger. A hollow, oval-shaped, sunken into the earth, lined with stone in some places, packed dirt in others. A depression that doesn't make architectural sense. It's not a cellar. It's not a foundation. It's a pit. You circle it slowly. The grass around it grows in uneven tufts, greener on one side, flattened on the other. A faint line in the earth, half path, half scar, leads in and out. This was the town's plague pit. They didn't advertise it. Of course they didn't. No one wants to remember mass death, especially not when it's piled, especially not when it's desperate. You sit at its edge, not close, just near enough to let it speak if it wants. There are no bones here anymore, at least not on the surface, but they're still here, layered beneath decades of soil, roots, and the heavy forgetting of time. You imagine the year 1349. The Black Death had arrived, not with warning, but with certainty. They say the church bells rang nonstop, that the smoke from funeral pyres turned the sky copper, that people stopped bothering with names and just counted. There weren't enough gravediggers. There weren't enough prayers. So they dug this communal grave, pit. You look down into the hollow and try to picture the scale, the shovels, the haste. The wrapped bodies dropped in one by one, or bundled together when the carts were full and no one had the stomach to sort them. Some were prayed over. Most were not. You lie back in the grass just above the rim, arms folded. The sky a pale lid above you. It's not frightening. It's heavy. And that heaviness doesn't come from horror. It comes from volume. So many lives. Stacked. Compressed. Forgotten. You turn your head and notice something curious. Stones. Arranged in a faint spiral, barely visible unless you're already lying down. You get up and walk it slowly. It's a marker. Not official. Not decorative. Just intentional. Someone tried to remember, and the spiral makes sense. Because death moves that way. Not in a line, but in circles, in patterns, in returns. You stop at its center. There's no plaque, no name, no dedication, but someone at some point stood exactly where you are now and thought they mattered. And they do, even now, especially now. You take a slow breath and whisper, not loudly, not for effect, "Thank you." Because some things deserve thanks even if we don't know exactly why. Because survival is a kind of inheritance. You sit again, this time without fear. Plague pits weren't born from cruelty. They were born from limit. The limit of what a town could handle. The limit of what grief could hold. The limit of how many names one heart could remember before it shattered. And in that, there's strange comfort, that even the worst chapters had structure, had hands, had someone somewhere doing their best. The breeze returns as you rise, not strong, just enough to move the grass in waves across the hollow, just enough to suggest that something unseen is exhaling again. The cliff behind you fades into shadow as you follow a sloping trail down toward the shoreline. What's left of it. You move carefully, shoes crunching on loose gravel and damp tufts of seagrass, the kind that squeaks faintly underfoot like it resents being stepped on. The tide is at its lowest now, exposing everything. The bones of Dunwich lie scattered across this ragged stretch of beach, foundation stones, twisted iron, smooth timbers dark as bog oak. It doesn't look like a ruin. It looks like wreckage, not from a ship, but from time itself. And just ahead, tilted at an impossible angle, is a structure that almost, but not quite, refuses to fall. A tower, crumbling, half swallowed, but unmistakably once part of something sacred. You make your way toward it, hopping across slick stones, the sea hissing in protest as if annoyed by your intrusion. This is what's left of Greyfriars Monastery, not the center of town, but once the edge of holiness. The friars chose the bluff for its silence, for its distance from temptation, for its commanding view of both the sea and the sinners who lived just beneath it. They built high walls, simple cells, a cloister garden. They made ink. They made prayers. They made themselves small in service of something larger. But they could not make the sea go away. You enter what remains of the tower, just enough room for one person to stand inside. Sea-worn bricks press close on every side. You run your fingers along the wall. It's wet, the kind of damp that never dries, the kind of damp that seeps into everything. A stone step rises before you, and you climb it, and then another, and then it ends. Midair. The staircase is gone beyond that. Just the void, open to the sea and the sound of gulls laughing at your caution. You sit, carefully, and look out. This would have been the watch point, where a friar might have stood, squinting into the horizon, hoping to see ships, or storms, or salvation. Instead, he would have seen waves, first gentle, then less so, then clawing. You wonder how many stayed, how many chose to remain even as the sea crept closer. Some surely left, others did not. A legend survives, never verified, always whispered, that one friar refused to abandon the tower. They say he rang the bell every night, long after the others had gone, until one day the bell rang no more. The bell, of course, is gone, but the space where it hung, that's still here, a hollow near the top, a circle of sky cut clean through stone. You stare through it, blue turning to ink, stars bleeding through, and for a second you feel dizzy, not from height, from scale. This town, this story, this ruin, it's all so small compared to the tide, the stars, the stubbornness of memory. And yet, you're here, still sitting, still listening, still hearing the echo of prayers you never learned, in a language you never spoke, whispered by people who never imagined you would come. The sea breathes below. You don't look down. Not yet. You let it be where it is, hungry, patient, eternal. Because right now, you're not afraid of it. Right now, you're part of what resisted, even if only for a while. You rise, your shadow stretching tall against the inside wall, and descend the tower's remains. At its base, someone has placed a stone. Not a grave, not a monument, just a stone, balanced perfectly. You leave it untouched, because some things should be left standing, even if you don't know who placed them or why. You walk toward the last stretch of beach, where the sand gives way to rock, and the sea begins again. Almost done, almost through, almost ready to sleep. The sea is nearer now, not just physically, but emotionally. You've felt it in every breath, tasted it on your tongue, heard its soft snarls and whispers for hours, but now it's with you, beside you, around you, waiting. You step onto the last stretch of beach, if you can call it that. The sand here is coarse, mixed with gravel and the powdered bones of long-lost walls. Every step crunches. Every footprint disappears faster than it should. You glance back just once. The cliffs loom, shadowed and fractured. The tower's silhouette flickers against the sky, a broken tooth on a dark jaw. And before you, in the shallows, something juts from the water. Not a boat, not a rock, a spire, crooked, half-submerged, covered in seaweed and barnacles, but still pointed. You move closer, not too close, just near enough to understand what you're seeing. The last church steeple of Dunwich, or what's left of it, shouldn't still be here. The sea should have devoured it long ago, ground it to rubble. But like so many things in Dunwich, it stayed longer than it had any right to. Some call it St. John's finger. Others say it's a myth. But here it is, stabbing up through the tide like it wants to scratch the sky one last time. You sit on a smooth boulder nearby. Let the salt wind wrap around you. You listen, and for the first time all night, you hear nothing. No birds, no insects, no footsteps, not even the wind's usual sigh. Just the stillness that happens when a story realizes it's nearly told. You close your eyes and imagine this exact spot, centuries ago. The bells ringing, the market alive, children being told to stay away from the water, fishermen arguing over whose net drifted, women baking and scolding and laughing, monks debating scripture and counting herring, waves tapping politely at the edge of the world. Tap, 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 and then, take. You open your eyes again. The spire is still there, but it feels smaller now, like it's bowed its head in acceptance. You stand, brushing salt from your hands. There's no plaque here, no ropes or fences or keep out signs, because Dunwich doesn't need protecting. Not anymore. What's left of it can't be stolen, can't be vandalized, can't be sold off piece by piece. What's left lives in the gaps, in what's missing. You walk a little further along the surf, letting the foam lick at your ankles. You spot fragments beneath the water, tiles, bricks, maybe even a door hinge. You don't touch them. They're not yours. They belong to the sea now, and the sea, strange as it is, remembers, just not in words. You pause one last time where the land ends and the tide begins, and you whisper, "I won't forget you," because someone should say it. Someone should carry this place into dreams and into dinner conversations and into the strange, quiet moments when history feels close enough to breathe on your neck. You turn inland again, back to trees, back to dirt, back to sleep, but you carry a piece of Dunwich with you now. Not a stone, not a souvenir, just a silence, a sound only you can hear. You're walking slower now, not from fatigue, not exactly, but because something in you doesn't want to leave. And maybe that's the thing Dunwich does best. It doesn't beg to be remembered. It just stays with you gently, like damp wool, like a tune you can't place. The trees return, their branches arching overhead like the ribs of some ancient creature. One that once walked this coastline, now fossilized in bark and shadow. The ground softens beneath your feet. Earth, not stone. Moss instead of sand. You're moving uphill again, but barely. Each step feels lighter. Each breath deeper. The wind has changed too. It's not sharp now. It's soft. Strokes, rather than cuts. Carries the faintest scent of brine and ivy. You inhale slowly, letting it fill you, press against your ribs, and settle in your chest like a warm stone. You pass a broken gate, wooden slats, hinges rusted to stillness. Nothing on the other side but wildflowers and a collapsed wall that might have been a barn or a house or a place where someone once kissed someone else under a leaky roof. And then, just ahead, a hollow, barely more than a dip in the ground. But the grass grows differently there, darker, denser, as if this patch has decided to keep a little more of the night for itself. You kneel beside it, not really knowing why, and place your palm on the earth. Warm, the warmth of held memory, not the past, not history, not tragedy, but presence. Dunwich is still here, not in maps, not in tour books, but in the soil, in the tilt of trees, in the shape your breath takes when you remember the silence of a plague pit or the way a bell once rang beneath water. And now, in you, you stand again, slower this time. Your body feels heavier in a good way, grounded, as though some part of you has been filled with silt and salt and echo. You follow the path now, eyes half-lidded, feet sure even when the trail disappears for a moment beneath leaves. You're not walking away anymore. You're walking with, and the town is not following you. It's part of you. You crest the last rise, where the trees thin and the stars regain their dominion. Overhead, constellations blink lazily. Orion's belt loosened, Cassiopeia lounging. The kind of sky that makes you feel gently irrelevant. And that's a comfort. You lie down on a patch of flattened grass. Fold your hands over your chest. Close your eyes. Let the ground rise slightly beneath you, as if it, too, wants to rest. And for the first time in hours, no, maybe in days, you exhale fully. Let it go. Let it all go. The bells, the sand, the vanished streets and finger bones of churches, the baked bread and forgotten prayers, the cliff's edge, the woman in the leper house, the stone on the chapel floor. You let it drift down into you, like silt, like sediment, like sleep, and as your breath slows, as your limbs surrender their weight to the earth, you hear, soft and far away, a bell, one final note, low, gentle, not a warning, not a call to prayer, just a lullaby, just a sound to carry you under, just Dunwich saying, "Rest now,